Okay, for those guys who don't know me, I'm Phil Hoggart. I'm a team driver with TeamC BeNeLux. With the release of our new TC02 MBC Friesland edition, I'd agreed to do a video for how to build the big boards properly, as these come with a kit. So here we go. To start off with, I've stripped the shocks down. Normally they come like this. I've taken all the pieces apart. This is the shock body. This is a shock collar for the spring. This is a spring. You get medium. This has two silver marks on the bottom with the kit. The soft and the hard are available as an option part. This is the spring collar. This is a shock top, and this is a shock bottom. These are all parts that were built when you get the kit. You then get the titanium shock shaft, the shock bottom and the ball, and then various rubber O-rings, spacers and things that I will go through where they go as I start. What I've also done is, this is the black piston, this is for the front. They come with 6 small holes in them. They're 1mm thick. I drill them out. I drill 3 of them out to 1.2mm. This gives a little bit more progression over larger jumps, and you keep the speed over the smaller jumps. I then take my shock bottom. Normally you have this rubber O-ring here. I found this rubber O-ring is too big and it leaks. I take a smaller O-ring that I have here, and I fit this over the top. This is very difficult because this O-ring is small, but I just have to feed it over. Okay, and that sits in the little indentation in the bottom of the shock bottom. Then you take a small plastic white piece. This goes in the bottom of here, making sure he sits on the bottom and sits flat. Little screwdriver, just push him in. Now take a rubber orange O-ring and push that in. And then take a white middle-sized plastic piece. He goes in the middle, into there. And then a rubber O-ring again, the orange one. He goes on top. Then the black aluminium spacer, he then goes on top as well. Push it down, and then you take this funny looking clip. This then sits inside the shock. I find if you push him in one corner and then just feed him around with your finger, he clicks in. I then take a screwdriver and just make sure he's in nicely, which he is. Then taking some shock oil, I just add a little bit to the O-ring on the outside, makes it easier to build, and in the middle for when the shock shaft goes through so it doesn't get damaged. Then I take the shock body and the shock bottom and I screw them together, being careful not to cross thread them, being very gentle. You'll find that as you screw him down, he will hit the O-ring and get tight, and then you have to keep going and he loosens off a little bit as the oil works in, and then that's him tight. Okay, you should have a shock that looks a little bit like that, and put that to one side. Then take the shaft and one of the C-clips. I then put a C-clip on the top ring on the shock shaft. Take a pair of pliers and being very gentle, being careful not to damage the shock shaft. Squeeze the two together. They go on quite difficult, but they go on. Then I take the piston, slide him down the shock shaft, all the way down, and then you can see the little indentation at the bottom. Take my second little circlip, feed him on. It's a little bit difficult, but yeah. Feed that on, then stand it on my setup board, take my pliers again, being careful again not to damage the shock shaft, and just squeeze him. And that's it, that's that piece built. I then take the shock body and the shaft, slide him through and down. This should be very easy because you've already oiled the O-ring. Slide him through, and that piece you've got. Then I take a pair of side cutters and I hold them against the end of the thread, not on the shock shaft. If you damage the shock shaft, this will tear the rubber O-ring and then it will leak. And then I screw the bottom on. It's quite easy. Just screw him on. And screw him on all the way up to the side cutters. This should give you between 1 and 1.5 thread left over here. That's nice. Okay, that's that piece done. And then you have 2 of the larger O-rings. The smallest one, he goes over the shock top, and this stops the shock cap leaking when you screw him down. Okay, and that sits like that. And then I take the shock collar, and the larger rubber O-ring, he goes inside there. This stops the shock collar unwinding itself while you're on the track. It seems a little bit big to start with, but once you get it all in its little indentation, it sits nicely. Then I take a drop of shock oil on my finger and just rub it into the rubber O-ring. It makes it easier to adjust the shock and the spring preload when you're on the track. Then with a little bit of upward pressure, I turn the shock body, sorry, and hold the ring. Just make sure you don't cross thread the shaft and the collar. Screw the collar all the way to the top. This makes the spring easier to get on later in the shock build. Okay, that's that piece done. Now filling with oil. I'm going to use some 20 weight oil in the front. I'm going to fill it all the way to the top, and then I'm going to push the piston all the way up, and then I'm going to wait a second and let it all the way down. You see all the air bubbles rising out and the oil level will drop. That's a shock bled. That's okay, you have to wait a second for all the air bubbles to come out. Then you take the shock top. This is a bladderless shock, so what you have to do is you just have to put some oil in the top of the shock. Makes a bit of a mess on your nice setup board, but it's no problem. Just roll the oil all the way around the top, and then if you quickly just turn him over and screw him on. You see the air coming out there? That's a good sign. And that's bleeding the shock. I then leave him a little bit loose, push the shock in to about that much, and then I screw the shock all the way down. This tightens the lid down. This will get rid of the last bit of air, and then your shock is built. You will lose some oil, it's no problem. Then you end up with that. That's your shock built. And then clean the shock a little bit. And then you need the ball for the shock bottom. One side of this piece is smaller than the other side, so you take the larger hole, you push the ball through, then I take a pair of pliers and gently just squeeze and move the shock shaft with my finger, and it clips in. That's in. Then I slide the spring over the shock like that, and I clip the spring collar onto the bottom. This will only go on one way as there is a little notch. Slide him on, and that's shock finished, and you have one front big ball. The video will come later of how to fit these to the kit, but for now that's a shock build.